I'm presenting Maintaining Personal Connections in Distance Learning today, and I'm going to talk about how to use some different kinds of social emotional questioning and some games. And my name is Joelene Hester, and I'm from Montour School District. I have my email on there, and I will also share that at the end. And then I know that Jana will be able to share my slides out to you so you can have my contact information. And if you would like a copy of anything that I'm doing, I'm happy to share that with you. My students took an AP exam yesterday, so I'm a little behind on getting everything into a Google Doc, but I'll have it in there by the end of the week. So again, I'm Joelene Hester. I teach 11th grade social studies. I teach global studies and AP European history at Montour. And I saw whenever you guys were coming in that some of you are elementary school teachers. I think that a lot of the stuff that I do will translate to the elementary level because I just run like sort of a very nurturing classroom. So even though I have juniors, they really do respond to that level of nurturing. So I think this will translate for you elementary teachers. We were told to share what our district is doing for our continuity of education so that you can have some context for what I'm doing in my distance learning classroom. And at Montour, we're following a no harm plan where the projected year-end grade for students as of March 13th on our last day is going to be their year-end grade. For the first week of distance learning, they had an opportunity to make up some third quarter work if they were late on something so that they could increase that grade. And then our fourth quarter is just going to simply be pass-fail, but that won't affect their score for the end of the year. And students know that. So I knew right away, we were gonna have some students that said, hey, I'm good with what my grade is projected to be right now. I don't really have to do anything for school. So that really, upped my game for staying connected just to keep these kids on board a little bit through the end of the year. Our failing students can only rise. So if we had a student who was failing when we left our physical buildings and they've really stepped it up this fourth 9 weeks, it's at our discretion if we want to pass them for the year. We are expected by our administration to provide a daily educational experience, some sort of contact every single day, and we are permitted to present new content. I know some districts were only permitted to review for the rest of the year. We are not permitted to have any formal assessments aside from college and the high school courses where the university would require them to have formal assessments. So why did I want to present something on staying connected, or why did I want to focus on staying connected? On the left-hand side of your screen, you should see this image from Dr. Brad Johnson. You've probably heard this before or seen it somewhere before. And it says relationships before rigor, grace before grades, patience before programs, love before lessons. And this has always been my classroom philosophy, that I put relationships before content all the time. If there's something going on and it's tough for students, like we'll take a break from content even. I don't let the content drive what we're doing every single day because, we don't know what kids have outside of school. And some kids just come to school to be loved. Even if they come from loving, supportive families, they still need like that extra love in school. On the right-hand side of the screen, I have some little snippets from emails of students that I've gotten since we've been out for distance learning. And I don't have those up there. That's not my purpose for staying connected with my students or making sure that they know that they're loved. My purpose is so that students feel the way that these students felt when they wrote the emails. I don't need the emails. I don't need the notes from parents. I don't need any of that. I just want the students to feel this way. And one theme that comes across in all of these emails that I get from students and parents is that, they get that I care about them. And so that's what I want to put forth is, we might be learning about the French Revolution, but I care about you first, and the French Revolution is secondary. So what have I been up to? Two things I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you about my social emotional questioning that I do, and then I'm going to show you about my Friday fun. So the social emotional questioning, I do once a week. I set it as a priority from the very beginning of distance learning. The very first day that we were allowed to be with the students again virtually, I did social emotional questioning, and my students know to expect it. So what I do right now with our no harm policy is I just mark down how many opportunities students had to engage in a week. And then I keep track with little check marks how many times they engaged. And students know that answering the social emotional questions counts towards their participation. So it's not, this extra thing on top of any work that they have to do. It's as valued as them engaging with the content. I actually have students who have completely logged out of school, are not engaging with the content at all, but I will get 2 check marks for them every week because they do the social emotional questioning and they do the Friday fun. Sometimes I time the social emotional questioning to come the day after I give them a heavier assignment. So if I give them a video lesson with a question to think about and respond to, I might not do social emotional questioning the next day after that because that's sort of, a less time consuming assignment. But if I give them an assignment that's a writing assignment, I'll give them 2 days before the writing assignment is due. And the day after I assign the writing assignment, there would be no new content, and that would be our social emotional questioning day. And I'm going to get into some details about that questioning here in a minute. Friday fun is exactly what it sounds like. It's every Friday. We have a live meet, no matter what. I keep it light and fun. I take about 2 or 3 minutes just to review what was posted as far as content all week, just in case they missed one of the posts. I use Google Classroom. And then we go right into our fun and I mix it up. And at the end of every Friday fun, I ask what they might want to do next week. And then if we had any sort of competition or contest, I make sure that I acknowledge the winners. I send something home in the form of a card or something like that. So here is just a little list of examples of some of the social emotional questioning that I've been doing. Mostly I ask them feelings questions. So I have on another screen over here that I'm going to refer to some of the examples that I ask. So one would be, just a simple post 1 word to describe how you're feeling right now. And then I have, sometimes I have little sets of questions that sort of go together. So one that students really dug into and they really reflected a lot on and spent a lot of time responding to was, how is life? How is school? And how can I help you? Another one, how much time are you spending on school each day? How much time are you spending on something that you enjoy each day? And then how do you feel about this balance? So these are just like really good prompts to get students to reflect on how they're feeling and how they're balancing everything. Some kids, they're locked away in a dark room on Netflix all the time and they might just look on Google Classroom every now and then. And it's a good way to like really get them to reflect on their own feelings and what's going on with them. Sometimes I'll ask them just simple questions like, how was your weekend? Sometimes I just ask, what's good? That's a question that I ask them in class a lot. We do journals in class. It's social studies class, but I keep them writing with journals where they can write about anything that they want to write. And sometimes the prompt in class is just, what's good? And they just tell me something that's good. So I've carried that over into my virtual classroom so they can continue to tell me what's good. If you're familiar with John Krasinski and his Some Good News broadcasts that he's been putting out, he played Jim on The Office, he plays Jack Ryan right now. I've posted those videos and I've asked them, tell me something that you found interesting or something you liked or just something that you think about something after you've watched this video. And it just sort of, gets them to see some positivity. I do a lot of positive self-talk prompts. Some things like complete the phrase, I feel happy when, I feel accomplished when, the best part of this week was. And then I had one day where we focused on kindness, where they had to think about the kindest act that they've ever witnessed in their lives, and then any kindness that they have done or any kindness that has been shown toward them throughout this time period. And I have a couple examples of the kindness prompts on the next slide. What I just want to point out though is I've read some articles on this and I've talked to some other educators and I've talked to my son's therapist. I have a 13-year-old who's in therapy who struggles with chronic depression. And I just wanted to point out that we should probably try to avoid asking students to find the good in this situation, or to find the silver lining in, you know, this whole pandemic or the quarantine. While we might be able to spin this positively, and I can say, look at all this time I've been able to spend with my children, and I say that's a wonderful thing. When we ask children to find the silver lining in a traumatic situation, you know, it's almost like we're pressuring them to spin that in their heads. And we need to recognize that right now, you know, this is traumatic. I've had some conversations with teachers where they say, no, only the students who are in bad home situations or students who don't have food security are being traumatized right now. And that's not true. All students, whether they come from a loving home, whether they have food security, whether their parents have kept their jobs and their health insurance, the students who are in the best situation like that are still, you know, lacking their social lives, their routine, their structure. You know, school is such a part of their development right now, and it's been taken from them. So, you know, I just don't feel that it's a good thing to specifically ask them to find the good in this situation. They can find the good in the world, they could find the good in a weekend, or, you know, the best thing that happened to them today, but not, I don't specify the quarantine. I have a little picture here from FlipGrid. If you haven't used FlipGrid, which I feel like everybody in the world's used FlipGrid at this point, but if you haven't checked it out, it's really nice. FlipGrid is an online platform where you share a code out to your students, and they go out to the website, and you can put a prompt or a question out there, and then you set a time limit. They record a video response. So you can set a 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes, and they can record a video response. This is great in the physical classroom for students who are quieter, who maybe don't like to get up in front of the classroom, or who maybe don't want to share their voice a whole lot in group situations. You can share out, you know, I teach social studies, so I will share out a prompt where students have to take a stance, and then they can go out, they can record their video response, no pressure because it's just them in their bedroom, and they can take a stance on the argument. And then for my particular situation, they would use evidence from the documents to back up their stance. Then another cool thing is that students can respond to other students. So I would have students, you know, find somebody who took a different stance from them and respond to them. And that would be part of a graded assignment. Well, I can use it in this social emotional questioning. I can give them a prompt, they can go out to FlipGrid, they can respond, and then I can have them respond to other students. And it's a really nice way to hear every student's voice without pressuring them to talk in front of other people. You may be doing some live meets and you have those students that keep their microphone muted and their screen muted the entire time. And FlipGrid's a really nice way to get them, you know, out of their shell and able to say something because it's low pressure. And it's just a good way to hear every student's voice. These are some examples of students reflecting on kindness. And I know this is too much to read right now, and if you get my slides, you can look at them later, but I gave students the opportunity to think about something that is the biggest act of kindness that they've ever had shown to them in their lives, and then something that they've seen during this time period, whether it's something that they've done or something that they've seen on TV or something that they've seen in their community or they've heard from their parents. And it's just a nice way to get students to, really reflect on some good without forcing them to find good in their own situation. They can reflect on good outside of the situation. Friday Fun is, like I said, exactly what it sounds like. There are so many times that I leave Fridays with like a headache from laughing so much and smiling so much, or just even crying in live meets because I'm laughing so much at my students, and then I snort, and then the students laugh more, and then somebody else snorts, and we're all laughing. So Friday Fun, we do lots of different activities. I'm still building on this. You'll see that the last bullet point here says others with a question mark, because I'd love to hear from you, ideas. You guys are probably doing a lot of fun things. I think if you're in this session, You know, you care about staying connected to your students, so you're probably doing fun things to stay connected to your students too, and I'd like to hear about that. One of the things we do on Friday Fun is the hot seat. And this is where a student will volunteer to be in the hot seat. And then I, along with the other students, will go into the chat feature of whatever video platform you're in. And we'll type up questions for that student, but we don't hit send on our chats yet. Then I'll set a timer. If it's a small group, we can do 2 minutes. If it's a larger group, I do about 1.5 minutes. And we all hit send on our chats at the same time as I start the timer. So the person in the hot seat has to start answering all of those questions. They just start going down through answering those questions. And when their time runs out, they can choose one of the leftover questions as a bonus question and answer that. And then it's somebody else's turn to be in the hot seat. And I have a picture here that's half nachos and half tacos, because one question I always ask students is tacos or nachos. There's no wrong answer. They love to talk about whether they like tacos or nachos better. But we have a lot of fun with the hot seat. Students love to ask each other questions. And this is something that I'm actually going to use Nearpod for. When we are back together in the physical classroom, I can still do a hot seat. Even though it's something that I discovered in distance learning, there's a way to do it physically in the classroom by using a classroom technology. We've also played Super Sleuth, where the students, in advance of our meeting, they send me 2 or 3 clues about themselves, and they send them privately so nobody else sees them. And then when we're in the live meet together, I read the clues out loud, or 1 clue, maybe 2, and then the students have to guess who submitted those clues. Whenever it's time to like out themselves, they'll unmute their mics. They'll say, okay, that was me. And then they'll tell us the story about how they got lost at Disney World when they were 6 years old, or, you know, how many dogs they have or whatever. And that's another nice way to learn about students. Corny joke contest, I will say, was absolutely the best. I had almost perfect attendance on Friday whenever we did this in my first period class, which starts at 8 a.m. and I teach juniors. So getting, you know, 20 kids up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Some of them were wrapped in blankets. They were still in their beds, but we had a corny joke contest where students came prepared with a corny joke, and we told our best or, you know, worst corny jokes. And then we decided, we voted using the chat feature, who won the corny joke contest. And in one class period, I actually had kids get into like a really heated competition where they just kept Googling corny jokes. And these 2 boys kept going after each other with these corny jokes. And it was like a decision made by 1 vote. Then I sent a card home to all the winners, letting them know that they won bragging rights and 1 million bonus points, because the joke is, you know, bonus points don't mean anything right now. I have one of the corny jokes, one of the best ones we got, to share with you after I finish this slide. Then I have a student-created game that we're going to play this week. And this one, it's a little bit complicated to explain. I'm actually going to have my students who created it. They're going to go over the rules. But you come up with a fact about yourself, but you just give little hints. So, you know, I have a student who's a volunteer firefighter, and he could give a hint that says, you know, I've been known to eat smoke. And then people are trying to figure out, like, what's he getting at here? And then he could give other hints, and eventually somebody might discover that the clue about him was that he's a volunteer firefighter. So again, my first period students came up with that one. We're going to try that out on Friday. Yesterday, I had a student in another class say that we could play categories online. So we're going to try that, not this coming Friday, but the following Friday. And I'm still looking for ideas because we have 3 weeks of school left. So if you have ideas for Friday fun, anything that you can do in the virtual classroom like that, just share it with me. I'll add it to my list, and I'm happy to share my list with you. So here is our winner for the corny joke contest, the boy named Josiah, who's known to be, you know, very flat. He read this, or he said this one in our meeting, and his screen was muted, and what we could see on the screen was his school picture, and he had done on purpose, because he's a junior, very messy hair and like half closed eyes in his picture. So he, you know, all you see is his little avatar reading, "My mother told me she was worried I was addicted to drinking brake fluid." And we're all sitting there like, okay, Josiah, is that the joke? And then he said, I told her, don't worry, I can stop at any time. And I know it's a really bad joke, but we all laughed so much. It was the delivery and just how bad this joke was. Josiah ended up winning that contest, hands down. That was not a close vote. Okay, so some helpful hints if you're going to do things like this. The way that I describe the chat for the hot seat is called waterfall chat. I never heard of that before, but I actually, very early on in distance learning, I went into a webinar with teachers who teach online professionally to get some tips. And one of the teachers pointed this out. So waterfall chat is where everybody thinks about their own response. They all type it into the chat at the same time, but nobody hits send. That way it's hard for them to, like just go off of somebody else's answers. If everybody's answering in their own time, the fastest typer or the person who came up with an answer quickest is going to have their answer out there first, and then other people could just follow the leader and type the same thing in. So when you do waterfall chat, everybody holds on to their answers and they hit them at once. So that way everybody has to have their own response. Another thing that I've discovered is that wait time in distance learning is significantly longer. I remember when I was a new teacher and I would have observations, one of the things that my administrators would point out was that, I wasn't giving enough wait time, because when you ask the question and the students are sitting there, it's awkward and we want to fill that silence and we want to have the answer. So that's something that I've worked on ever since I became a teacher, and I've gotten really good at it in the classroom. And I tell my students all the time, I'm super comfortable in awkward silence, so I'll wait all day while you think about that question. In distance learning, the wait time is exponentially bigger. And sometimes it's just because students are trying to figure out, the question and then how to unmute themselves. So that's something that we really just have to be okay with it still being silent a little bit longer. Just let it go a little bit longer. And then if you're using Google Meet, I know that Zoom has its own little hand raising capability. I don't use Zoom a whole lot. We use Google Classroom and the whole Google suite. So I've been using Google Meet, but the Nod extension is wonderful. So you have students they add the extension on, and then up in their upper left-hand corner of their screen, they see these little icons. So whenever you're talking, they can give you a thumbs up, they can clap, they can give all these different reactions. If they click on the little guy with his hand up, that will persist on your screen, and you have to actually dismiss that one. So that's a really nice way for me to say, oh, hey, Jack, you have a question. What's your question? And then he can unmute and ask his question, and then I can dismiss him. I dismiss his little notification. And that way there's, fewer people talking over each other, or you can say, is everybody ready to send their chat now? When you wait for the thumbs up. The Nod extension has been wonderful. So what lessons have I learned? So many lessons. I only have time to cover a couple of the lessons that I've learned. Sometimes it's going to be a blast. Hot seat is super fast paced. There's somebody new in the hot seat every few minutes. Kids love this game. They love to tell about themselves. Sometimes I'll say, who else wants to go in the hot seat? And, maybe a lot of the volunteers have already gone, and they'll say, Ms. Hester, you need to go in the hot seat, because they want that interaction. And there's infinite questioning. So that's just a really good time. And like I said before, the corny joke contest, I think that's the most fun I've had in distance learning. And if you're the kind of teacher who can send prizes home, like if you have, I know the year's over, so they can't use homework passes or anything like that, but I know some teachers are doing like little stickers or gift cards or something. I'm stuck at home with my kids. I don't have anything. So I just send home the cards with 1 million bonus points. And my students get that kind of sarcasm. So sometimes it'll be a blast, but sometimes it's going to be a bust. And you just ask student, you say, this was sort of a bust. What can we do next time? Super Sleuth, in my 8 a.m. class, it started off slowly. They're tired. They're supposed to be guessing who submitted this hint. I needed to tweak it a little bit. And sometimes I'll test these things on my own children at home before I put them out to my students. And if you are dealing with older children, Early morning classes are tough. Their sleep schedules are all messed up. I know that most of my students are turning their work in at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes they need time to warm up a little bit. So, you might not have the best attendance for that. But like I said before, as I keep track of student attendance, sometimes students are getting 2 check marks a week, and the 2 check marks that they're getting are the social emotional prompts and the Friday fun. And they're not doing any of their work because they know that their grade is already secured for the end of the year, but at least they're staying connected. At least they're getting online and still staying connected. So practical tips, if you want to get started right away and you want to try something like this, or maybe you're doing something like this and you want to add to it a little bit, be authentic. You can't really fake an attitude of caring. But, I'm preaching to the choir here. Like I said, if you're in this session right now, it's because you care. If you saw the title, Maintaining Personal Connections, and you were like, I want to know more about that, then you obviously care. I think all teachers care. Why would we do this job if we didn't? But make this a priority. My students know this is not a time filler. This isn't something that I do so that I only have to come up with 3 lessons a week. I have to pack a lot of content into those 3 lessons because I'm taking 2 days to just stay connected to my students. But I think it's important. Like I said, some of these kids are only logging on for these right now, and it's a way to still give them some sort of connection to their classmates and to school. And I think that relationships come before content, like I've said, and especially now it's even more important. We don't want these students to go into, their bedroom caves and not be heard from again because school's over and they don't have to do any work. Be sensitive. Ask feelings questions. Ask just, how they're feeling, how they're doing, and remember to avoid asking students to find a silver lining in a bad situation, because not all of them are able to, and we don't want them to feel pressured to have to spin this in a good way if their grandparents are sick, or their parents have lost their job, or they're worried about where their next meal is going to come from. And then be quiet. Remember, the wait time is going to increase significantly. You've probably experienced this. You need to be used to awkward silence, and then you need to be even more used to awkward silence and take it a step further and wait a little bit longer. And then I have one more tip, and this is just to network. There are teachers everywhere doing fun things. I'm sure that you all are doing fun things, or maybe you're even doing some of the same things that I'm doing. So, ask other professionals, adapt the ideas that they have. Give students a choice. I love to ask my students, like, what do you want to do next? Or does anybody have any ideas? The disguise game that my students came up with, 5 students decided to stay in on the call whenever class was over. And then they emailed me later this plan for this game that they came up with that we're going to try this Friday. Just keep asking yourself, how do I make sure my students know that they are loved? And you're going to, if you keep asking yourself that, you will come up with things to do with your students as often as you want to implement these plans. My next steps, we were told to tell you something that I want to do. I want to learn how to use Nearpod. I did this presentation for a teacher friend who I went to grad school with, and I mentioned that I wanted to do the hot seat, and I couldn't figure out how to do it in the physical classroom if we were back in the physical classroom in the fall, which I hope we can be safely. And she said I could totally do that with Nearpod. I've heard people talk about it, but I've never taken the time to learn it. Since we're all in the mindset of learning new things right now and adapting, that I'm gonna jump right into that next.